A 4-year-old boy vanished, in less than 30 seconds. In a park full of people. No one saw who took him. And to this day, no one knows how it was done. He was gone. No scream. No struggle. No witnesses who could explain it. Just an empty space, where a little boy used to be. Before we go any further, take a moment to support stories like this. Like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to Cold Crime Case, because cases like this don't solve themselves, they stay alive because people refuse to forget. It was the spring of 1998. A peaceful suburban neighborhood in Texas, the kind where people felt safe enough to leave their doors unlocked, where children played freely, and where danger felt like something that only existed on the evening news. The community park sat at the center of it all. It wasn't hidden or isolated. It was open. Familiar. Full of life. Slides creaked as children climbed to the top. Swings moved back and forth in steady rhythm. Parents sat nearby, talking casually, keeping a loose eye on their kids. There were strollers lined up near picnic tables. Coolers packed with snacks. Laughter in every direction. It was the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. And that's exactly why no one saw it coming. Jackson Reed was 4 years old. He had blonde curls his mother refused to cut because she thought they were too beautiful to lose. His eyes were bright blue, the kind that seemed to reflect curiosity in everything he saw. He was always moving. Always laughing. Always chasing something. That spring, it was Spider-Man. He loved Spider-Man more than anything. He wore the same red and blue shirt almost every chance he got, a birthday gift from his grandmother. On that day, he wore it again. Paired with small Velcro sneakers he had recently learned to put on by himself. It made him proud. It made him feel grown. That Saturday started like any other. The weather was perfect. Warm, but not too hot. Clear skies stretching endlessly overhead. A light breeze moving gently through the trees. Jackson's mother, Sarah, had planned a simple afternoon. Nothing complicated. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just a trip to the park so her son could play, burn off energy, and maybe see a few familiar faces. His father, Mark, was out for the day at a golf outing with clients. He wouldn't be back until later that evening. There was no reason to think anything would go wrong. Sarah packed a small cooler. Juice boxes. Goldfish crackers. A few of Jackson's favorite toy cars. She dressed casually, jeans, a white tank top, flip-flops. It wasn't a special occasion. It was just another normal day. They arrived at the park just before 3 in the afternoon. Already, it was busy. Children scattered across the playground. Some digging in the sandbox. Others racing around the edges of the park. Parents gathered in small groups, talking, laughing, occasionally glancing toward their kids. Everything felt safe. Routine. Predictable. Jackson didn't hesitate. The moment they arrived, he ran ahead toward the swings. Sarah watched him go, smiling slightly as he moved with that familiar burst of energy. He blended into the scene almost instantly. Just another child among many. Nothing about him stood out to anyone else. And maybe, that's exactly what made what happened next possible. At some point, Jackson wandered slightly away from the swings. Not far. Just toward the edge of the playground. There, something caught his attention. A butterfly. Bright. Moving unpredictably. He followed it, laughing, completely absorbed in the moment. A few feet away, Sarah shifted her focus. Just briefly. Maybe to adjust something in the cooler. Maybe to respond to someone speaking nearby. Maybe for no reason at all. It was the kind of moment that happens every day, to every parent, without consequence. But this time. That small moment was all it took. When Sarah looked back, Jackson was gone. At first, there was no panic. Just confusion. She scanned the immediate area, expecting to see him just a few steps away. Maybe behind the slide. Maybe crouched near the sandbox. "Jackson," she called out, her voice calm. No response. She stood up, walking a few steps forward. "Jackson?" Still nothing. Now her voice changed. Louder. Sharper. Other parents began to notice. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Someone asked what was wrong. "My son. I can't see him." Within seconds, the energy of the park shifted. People began looking around. Checking corners. Peering behind equipment. Calling his name. The laughter faded. Replaced by something else. Something uneasy. Something growing. Minutes passed. No sign of him. People spread out further. Toward the parking area. Toward the edges of the park. Still nothing. And then. Panic. Real panic. Because children don't just disappear like that. Not in places like this. Not with this many people around. Not without someone seeing something. But no one had. No one could say where he went. No one could explain what happened. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. By the time authorities were called, the situation had already escalated beyond control. The first police unit arrived to a scene that no longer resembled a normal afternoon. The park was quickly secured. Yellow tape stretched across entrances. Parents clutched their children tightly. Some refused to leave. Others stood frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed, or rather, what they hadn't. Because that was the most disturbing part. No one had seen anything. Not a struggle. Not a suspicious person. Not even a moment that seemed out of place. And that absence became the most chilling clue of all. Search efforts began immediately. Officers questioned everyone present. Names were taken. Statements recorded. But answers were nowhere to be found. As time passed, more units arrived. Then more. The situation escalated rapidly into a full-scale search operation. Volunteers from the neighborhood joined in. People moved through the surrounding streets. Backyards were checked. Garages opened. Every possible place a child could hide, or be hidden, was searched. Dogs were brought in. They picked up Jackson's scent. Followed it. And then lost it. Completely. As if it had simply stopped. Helicopters circled overhead, scanning from above. Nearby water areas were examined. Divers prepared to search. But even with all of that effort, there was still nothing. No trace. No direction. No answers. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. Because from here, it only gets more disturbing. As investigators began piecing together timelines, interviewing witnesses, and analyzing every possible detail, one terrifying possibility started to take shape. Someone had taken him. And they had done it. In seconds. Without being noticed. In a place filled with people. Which raised a question that still hasn't been answered to this day. Was it random? Or was it planned? Someone had taken him. That was the conclusion investigators couldn't ignore. Because children don't just vanish, not like that, not without help. Not without someone making it happen. And if that was true, then it meant something far more disturbing. It meant that whoever was responsible had either been incredibly lucky, or they had been watching. Waiting. Studying the environment, the timing, the distractions. Because in a park filled with parents, children, and movement, there is almost always a moment. A small window where attention slips. Where eyes turn away. Where noise covers silence. And for someone patient enough, that moment is all they need. Investigators began reconstructing the timeline down to the smallest detail. They spoke with every parent who had been there. Every child who was old enough to remember. Every neighbor who might have seen something from a distance. But the answers came back the same. No one saw Jackson leave. No one saw anyone take him. No one saw anything that stood out. Which didn't make sense. Because something had to happen. And yet, it was as if whatever happened had blended perfectly into the background. Like it belonged there. Like it didn't draw attention at all. That detail alone changed the direction of the investigation. Because it suggested something chilling. Whoever took Jackson didn't stand out. They didn't look suspicious. They didn't behave in a way that triggered alarm. They may have looked normal. Like any other parent. Any other adult. Any other familiar face in the park. And that possibility introduced a new layer of fear. Because if that was true, then the person responsible might have been standing there the entire time. Watching. Waiting. Unnoticed. Investigators began asking a different kind of question. Not just who was there, but who belonged there. Residents of the gated community were interviewed first. Names were cross-checked. Alibis were noted. Patterns were examined. Most of the people at the park that day knew each other in some way. Or at least recognized each other by face. It was that kind of neighborhood. Which meant strangers stood out. Or at least, they were supposed to. But when investigators asked about unfamiliar faces, the responses were uncertain. Some said they thought they saw someone they didn't recognize. Others weren't sure. A few mentioned a man near the parking lot. Another recalled someone sitting alone on a bench for longer than usual. But none of the descriptions were clear enough. None of them lined up perfectly. And none of them could be confirmed. It was like trying to build a picture from fragments that didn't quite fit. Meanwhile, the search continued. Expanding beyond the park. Into surrounding neighborhoods. Nearby roads were monitored. Checkpoints were briefly set up. Vehicles were noted. Drivers questioned. But no one reported seeing a child being forced into a car. No one noticed anything unusual leaving the area. And that raised another terrifying possibility. What if Jackson never made it to the road? What if he had been taken somewhere close? Somewhere hidden. Somewhere that wouldn't be obvious. That line of thinking led investigators to search closer, not farther. Backyards were combed again. Sheds opened. Pools checked. Every possible space within walking distance was examined with precision. But again. Nothing. No trace of clothing. No sign of struggle. No evidence left behind. It was as if whoever had taken him had left no mistake. And that level of control didn't feel random. As hours turned into night, the atmosphere changed again. Searchlights replaced sunlight. Voices became quieter. More focused. More urgent. Because with every passing hour, the chances of finding Jackson safe began to shrink. And everyone knew it. Even if no one wanted to say it out loud. Sarah refused to leave. She stayed near the park, answering questions over and over again. Replaying every moment in her mind. Every second leading up to when she last saw him. What did she miss? What could she have done differently? Was there a sound she ignored? A movement she didn't notice? Those questions would stay with her long after that day ended. Mark returned home to news that no parent is ever prepared to hear. His son was missing. Gone. Without explanation. Without warning. He rushed to the scene. And like everyone else, he searched. He asked questions. He tried to make sense of something that didn't make sense. But there were no answers waiting for him. Only silence. And growing fear. By the next morning, the case had expanded beyond the local level. State resources were brought in. Search teams became more organized. More strategic. Flyers were printed. Jackson's face, bright eyes, blonde curls, Spider-Man shirt, was suddenly everywhere. On street corners. In shop windows. Across nearby towns. Hotlines were set up. Tips began to come in. Some seemed promising at first. Reported sightings. Descriptions that almost matched. But one by one, they led nowhere. Each lead collapsed under scrutiny. Each possibility faded. And the reality remained unchanged. Jackson Reed was still missing. Days passed. Then weeks. And with time, the case began to shift. From an active search to an investigation. Investigators looked deeper into the people closest to the situation. Standard procedure. Family members. Friends. Anyone with access. Anyone with potential motive. It was necessary. But it was also painful. Because sometimes, the truth hides closer than anyone wants to believe. Sarah and Mark were questioned extensively. Their timelines reviewed. Their statements compared. But nothing suggested involvement. No inconsistencies. No evidence. Nothing that pointed in their direction. And so the focus shifted again. Back outward. Back into the unknown. There were theories. There always are. Some believed it was a crime of opportunity. Someone passing through. Someone who saw a chance and took it. Others believed it was planned. That Jackson had been watched. Chosen. Targeted. That someone knew the park. Knew the patterns. Knew exactly when to act. But without evidence. Those theories remain just that. The most disturbing part wasn't what investigators knew. It was what they didn't know. No clear suspect. No confirmed timeline beyond a few minutes. No physical evidence tying anyone to the disappearance. Just a moment. A gap. A space in time where everything changed. And no one could explain how. As the months passed, media attention grew. The story spread beyond Texas. People followed the case. Discussed it. Tried to understand it. Because it challenged something fundamental. The idea that crowded places are safe. That being surrounded by people means protection. This case proved otherwise. Because whatever happened that day happened in plain sight. And still, no one saw it. Years went by. The investigation never truly stopped. But it slowed. Leads became less frequent. Tips less reliable. The urgency faded into routine. But for the family, nothing changed. Every day without answers felt the same. Incomplete. Unresolved. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. Each one marked by absence. By questions that still had no answers. What happened in those few seconds? Who was responsible? And most importantly, could it have been prevented? Because that's the question that lingers. The one that stays with anyone who hears this story. Could something so sudden, so silent, so precise, have been stopped? Or was it always going to happen? Exactly the way it did? Now, years later, the case remains open. Unsolved. A cold file filled with reports, interviews, timelines, and unanswered questions. But somewhere within all of that, the truth still exists. Hidden. Waiting. And maybe, just maybe, someone knows something. Something they didn't realize mattered. Something they chose not to say. Or something they've been holding on to all this time. And if that's true, then this story isn't over. Because cases like this don't end when the search stops. They end when the truth is finally uncovered. So if you've made it this far, take a moment. Like this video. Share it. And subscribe to Cold Crime Case. Because the more people who hear stories like this, the harder it becomes for them to stay buried. And somewhere out there, the answer still exists, waiting to be found.